Invite, invite, invite
That's
to
the
get
word.
coffee. I'm looping it again.
God, I'm tripping.
Talking
I
shit.
can't see my
Talking.
mind.
I'm not recording. I gotta
Talking.
record this shit.
I'm eating vicariously.
You're eating vicariously.
Get the fruit.
Invite, invite, invite to
That's the
get
word.
coffee. And welcome to tonight's edition of Talking Shhh I.T with Glenn and Tony. Have a great show, guys.
Thanks, Ed. Oh my God, that was a trip.
Loopity loopy loop. It happens.
Well, I couldn't tell where the real you left off and the loop you was. And Ange actually sounded identical, both on the loop and her regular mic.
I was trying to add different things each layer so that I could tell which one we were in, or if it was the same one going around and around. But
Yeah, I wasn't sure if she was instigating the loop on purpose. Little shit.
Now, some of the stuff that we were just talking about, though, some music theory stuff, we were just thinking about with some chord changes and changing some inversions. But we should talk about that a little bit to start out.
Yeah. Those chords I was playing with before we started, I'm going to keep exploring that progression. I like this new way of dropping with that sixth. But you were telling me about this this video that you had on the guy that we were watching. Was that 2 weeks ago? We watched his other video.
Yeah, I think it was Signals Music Studio. He had the one that had the borrowing chords. It was Signals Music Studio who was doing the borrowed chords from the alternate keys. But this one was just about writing chord progressions.
Was that the one that he used? He had the chords over on the right side and he was showing them as he was playing them?
At one point, yeah, that one was that. This was the one where it was more of a basic level, where he's just talking about basically just to get started to write, little 4-chord progressions and just 3 quick rules to follow, and always working in the major scale at this point. And it was just a quick one for doing that.
And the most common ways you would start with chord progressions.
Right. He's basically he basically ignores the 7.
The most popular.
He ignores the diminished chord and just basically sticks with the 1 through the 6. So you're dealing with the the major 1, the 4, and the 5, and the minor 2, 3, and 6, and putting them all together and just kind of going random with it. But if you always follow these couple of rules, you can always get something that'll come back around and sound like something that works, which is kind of cool. So it's something that we can explore also on the keyboard there with you.
Yeah. These are the kinds of progressions I tend to start with. I mean, most of my ideas do start with the most common progressions. I'm only shifting into these melodic shifts because of all this instigation that you've been giving me.
Yeah, that's good stuff though. Whether it's
these
borrowing chords, doing modal shifts, or just exploring different progressions, where if you just basically take the 7 out of the equation for now and just think about the 1 through the 6 and just any number 1 through 6 and just come up with a 4, a 4-digit number basically right there, and just play that. It could go back to the same chord a couple of times. You could repeat a chord a couple of times. That's where you could have the 5 twice, or you could have 1 5 1 4, whatever. You can do things like that, but just changing it up to see what it says to you.
1 5 5 1.
Yep, 1 5 5 1. Sure. And that way, that's a good one because that actually rotates the break. Because then once you get rolling, it's 2 1s and 2 5s after each other, but it started in the middle, so it throws you into like a freight train roll.
That's something I've done on a couple of different songs with that approach.
It's going to start sharing the video, but we have Angie sharing the background there. It's all good.
Oh, is Angie still sharing on the? Yeah, you're right. Let's see if we can get her attention here. Hey, Ange. Punk in. I'll send her a Skype message.
In the meantime, we do have the keyboard hooked up still, right?
Yeah, I got to switch over my headset.
Cool.
All right, she should get that message. Let me.
There you go.
All right, Now I'm over on my... You're hearing that okay?
Yep, yep. It's coming through nice. The room has a little bit of noise in the background, but that's fine.
Oh, yeah, well,
It dimmed down now.
when I do that, I can get the room noise to go, but then I have no mic.
Yeah. That sounds good, like when you're talking right there.
Yeah, it should stabilize a little bit. If I'm playing, then it kind of disappears.
Sounds good.
Hey, Angie. I don't think she has her other headset on. Let me see if I can bring up her computer.
This one was from Signals Music Studio. We were also doing a couple of videos from Creative Sauce the other week. I was looking at a few from Paul David's also
Actually, I want to
for
go
guitar
back to...
stuff.
I actually just recommended Creative Sauce like 4 times in the last couple of days to new Cakewalk users that are looking for a good introductory into the interface and everything, and he's got the best one.
Nice. Yeah, he definitely had a good coverage.
Okay,
of that.
I can see it. There we go.
Cool.
Okay.
Yes, the first one.
Now it's all you.
And this one would be from
I overrode the Ange.
nice. Signals Music Studio. He's a little bit into the video, but he was actually going over the major scale.
Yeah. This was the one I was thinking of.
Cool.
Now, at the very end of this video, I do want to talk about how can we make things more complicated, how can we add in more theory, and also how can we get rid of the theory to just kind of let ourselves write intuitively instead of through these mechanical processes. I don't want to waste any time. I just like to get right into it by starting to write some chord progressions in our C major scale. To do that, we need to start on the note C. From there, we have a formula of whole steps and half steps that will build us any major scale. It goes whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So a whole step is 2 frets, and a half step is 1 fret. And if I do that sequence of half steps and whole steps, it gives me my C major scale, and it gives me these notes: C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now in music, what we do is we give every single one of those notes its own number. And we don't just write it as a normal number, we write it as a Roman numeral: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. After that, we give every single one of those notes its own chord. So the first note there gets its own chord. We give it a major chord, all right? Major chords will get an uppercase Roman numeral, but the second note, we're going to give it a minor chord, and that means we're going to flip that Roman numeral to be a lowercase Roman numeral. So the second note gets a minor chord, the third note gets a minor chord, the fourth and fifth note both get major chords, the sixth note gets a minor chord, and the seventh note gets a diminished chord. Now in this video, I'm going to completely skip the diminished chord. I don't even want to talk about diminished in this video. That's a really deep topic that goes way past just writing cool poppy chord progressions. So for our purposes today, we're really only using the 6 chords
Now,
of the
I
key
would
of
like
C,
to see
and
his
we're going to ignore that
later
7th
video
chord. Those 6
on that.
chords are C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, and A minor. And you can hear those sound fantastic together. But here's where the real magic comes in. If I want to write a chord progression in the key of C, here are the 3 simple rules that I want to place on you to write a chord progression. Number 1, make sure that we're writing 4 measures of music. I think 4 is a great place to start. I don't want to start with 5 measures. It's kind of hard to write a 5-measure progression. But if we just stick with 4, we'll be in pretty good shape. Our next rule is to make sure that we're starting on the 1 chord. Today, that would be C major. We're in the key of C, that is my 1 chord. So I have to start on my 1 chord. The last rule is that the very last measure needs to be either my 4 chord or my 5 chord. That would be either an F chord or a G chord. And with those simple rules, I can literally just guess at anything and get a great sounding chord progression. Here's what I mean. I'm starting on 1. Pick any note between 1 and 6. I'm going to pick 3, okay? My 3 chord, you can see, is an E minor. So if I'm going to go from C, I'm going to go to an E minor. Let's pick another chord. I'll go 2. 2 is D minor. And now I have to do a 4 or 5 at the end. And let's try the 4 first. The F. Okay, so let's play that chord progression again. I had C, I had E minor, I had D minor, and then I had F. And I think that sounds pretty nice. If I give it a strumming pattern now, let's take a listen. Yeah, I think that sounds great. So what if I did the 5 chord at the end instead? All right, so let's do the exact same thing, but this time, instead of ending on an F chord, I'll have a G major at the end instead of an F major, okay? Here's the 1, 3, 2, 5. Do you hear that sounds a little bit brighter, a little bit bolder? That's why I want you to use
like it
the
resolves
4 chord
better, too.
or the 5 chord at the end.
Yep.
Going from the 4 chord to the 1 chord is called a cadence. You can hear going from 4 to 1 kind of gives you this soft landing back to my 1 chord. And going from 5 to 1 gives you this really strong landing.
That's
back
what
to
they
my
call
1
it?
chord. So
Yep.
by putting a 4 chord or
That's
a
a
5 chord
flagal
at the end
cadence,
of my
huh?
measure, it kind
And
of
authentic cadence
makes
from 5
you
to 1.
want to come back to repeat the chord progression on 1 again. So by making sure you're starting on 1 and ending on 4 or 5, you'll always be setting up this kind of infinite chord progression loop. And literally, we can do anything in between those 2 chords. Let's try something different. I'm starting on C again, and this time I'll go to the 6 chord, which is A minor. I'll go to the 5 chord, and then maybe just stay on the 5 chord. All right? I said, I mean, there's no rule against doing a chord twice in a row, so let's do this again. I had 1, 6, and 5. Stay on 5. Again, it's 1, then the 6, and then the 5, and then maybe the 4. All right, and I'm literally just guessing numbers out of thin air. Any chord I pick between 1 and 6 would work out. Now, to make sure we really got the grasp of this, let's just do it all over again really quickly in the key of G. I'm going to start on a G note, and I'm going to build my scale. I do a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, and that gives me the notes G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. Then I'm just going to write in my Roman numeral formula underneath the scale, and it tells me what chords I'm allowed to play. Once again, that uppercase Roman numeral means I'm allowed to play a G major. That lowercase Roman numeral means I'm allowed to play an A minor for my 2 chord, and then a B minor, a C major, a D major, and an E minor. And we are going to skip the F sharp diminished. Just in case you were curious, we'd actually have to play it as an F sharp half diminished, and it would sound like that. And it does actually resolve to the 1 chord. But like I said, advanced stuff, we'll talk about that in another video. I actually already have a video on diminished chords if you'd like to know a little bit more about the theory of just those. So let's follow our rules again. Let's set up 4 measures. We'll start with G. We'll make sure that we're ending with either C or D. And the only thing that I want to maybe spice up a little bit today is I want to do a split measure. I want to take one of these measures and not just do 1 chord for the whole measure. I actually want to divide it in half so we get like a quick change between 2 different chords. Okay? So let's start on G major and we'll do a full measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. From there, let's try going to the 4 chord. 2, 3, 4. And then let's go to the 2 chord, and then I'm going to split that measure with the 6 chord. Just 2 strums on each one. So 2 strums of an A minor, that's my 2 chord. 2 strums of an E minor, that's my 6 chord. Then I want to end with my 5 chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's my full progression. I'm going to go 1, 4, 2, 6, 5. All right, now let's give it a strumming pattern.
Now that's an interesting one.
And that works pretty good. Also, you don't have to strum these things. What if I arpeggiated them or did like a picking pattern through each one? So here's my G, the C, A minor, E, D. All right. Obviously, think about this outside of your guitar. What would this sound like on a piano?
That quick shift from the A minor to the E minor is really cool.
Yeah, the half measures.
Sounds like music. This is the kind of thing that was always elusive to me. I never knew, how do you just write stuff that sounds good? Well, you do it like this. You find out what your key is, you write some chords in that key, and you make sure that it kind of tails off at the end with a 4 or 5 chord to keep the whole thing looping. And boom, you're sounding musical. Now, if I wanted to do something on top of this, like sing or play a guitar solo, you can probably guess the notes I would sing or the notes I would play for a guitar solo come from the scale G major. When we were writing in C, I would obviously be playing and singing in the C major scale. So that's really what it means to play or to write in 1 key. Now, like I said, this is very limiting. This is very restricting. I'm putting these 3 rules on you, saying you have to start here, you have to end on this, and you don't really
that's
want
what
to be
used to mess
writing
me
your
up.
own soulful, emotional
when I
music
tried to
with these
write
kind of rules in
after
place.
music
But I
theory,
really do think this is
that's
a
how
good
I
place
felt.
to start
Like,
at
oh,
least
I'm
getting
breaking
something
rules.
that's musical.
Yep.
Ultimately, in a perfect world, you go sit down with your guitar and your emotions just pour out and your message comes out through your music. But you can't count on that. That's not something you can rely on. And when those moments don't happen, when you don't find that inspiration, and when things don't just click in place, you kind of have to just brute force your way through things. And to just write something, whether you like it or not, just get something out there, and then maybe later on that will actually inspire something. Or maybe that's where the idea starts and you change it and modify it from there. But you really have to expect that songwriting isn't going to always be this natural process where, you know, the waves come to you and you see the music and it just expresses itself instantly through. I mean, that does happen, and those are magical moments, and those are probably going to be your best songs when it's effortless. But that's like, for me personally, that's like 5% of my songwriting, just as that effortless, thoughtless process. 95% of the other parts of it is just brute forcing my way through things that I think might work, and then finding something that kind of works, and then later on the idea really strikes and the inspiration strikes, and I can just throw away all my mechanics and my rules, and I can just do what I'm hearing and do what I really want to do. So there's the very basics of it. Hopefully you get the idea that this is simple stuff. I mean,
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah. I like that second one he was showing with it. Was he saying G, C? He had the A to E. What was his last chord?
Let's see, what did he do? We can back it up
Go
and
to
see.
the 5.
Probably to the 5. He wanted to end with either the 5 or the 4, I think it was. Yeah, he was going to the D when he was in G.
And you use the F sharp when you're in the D. So if he's trying to avoid,
well, at that point he was playing in G, so that would be in the F sharp would be in there, because the key of G you have the 1 sharp, which is the F sharp.
Yeah, but the F sharp is the diminished chord that he was ignoring on those 2 examples.
Those 2 examples in the first.
You do use the F sharp in the D.
Right, exactly. Use the note, but not the chord.
Yeah. I think that's what he was talking about.
Yeah, and you can feel how like the split measure gives you that little build in there too.
Yeah, it's not a way I typically approach G major, because usually when I'm playing in the major keys, I approach them a certain way. His chord jumps there, going to that second. Second is one that I should use more, because it gives that like tone shift and mood shift. And that little A minor to E minor bump together on a half measure like that is a cool. It's a cool way to shift over to this D major. I mean, I could literally start playing in D major at that point if I wanted to.
Yep.
In D major, jump into the 4, into the 2. Oh, got me transposing, Glenn.
Yep. That was coming
One
through
day
the
I'll
A.
be able to do that on the fly. Yeah, D major is not one that I'm as fluid in. G and C are burned in my brains.
Yeah, D, you got that extra sharp. You got to deal with the C sharp, but it is the 2 sharp. So in most of the chords, you're trying to deal with either one of them or the other one. You're not usually trying to deal with both of them at the same time, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah, usually when I'm playing in D, I've got a couple of songs in D. Yeah, it's not a hard scale, actually. Once I play it a couple of times and I feel it out in a way that I'm used to, then I
Yeah, it's just
realize that
gaining
really
comfort with
isn't
it.
that
Sure.
much. Yeah, you're really only dealing with that one sharp, right?
Yep.
Yep. And you know what he mentioned at the beginning there, for people who are trying to understand music theory at the basic level, learning those interval jumps, you know, the whole step, with whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step.
Yep.
If you can burn that in your brain, you've got major down at that point, no matter where you start.
And the other thing
It's
is
trickier on a keyboard because
you've also got minor down because you just started the sixth one. So if you start, like if you picture that layout that you just had of the whole and half steps, if you start at the sixth one and went around that way, that's your minor scale. So the minor scale starts with that
with
whole
minor,
step
you
and
got
then a half
full
step.
step, full step, half step, full step, full step, half step, full step, full step.
Yep.
So it's just about where those two half steps are.
And once you get a feel,
It's
that's a good way
easy
to find where they are. Yeah.
on a keyboard. With a keyboard, it's much more easier for me to visualize that whole pattern. I don't know how you guys do it on the guitar as far as, I mean, yes, your whole step is what, 2 frets?
Yep. 2 frets versus 1
When
fret.
you go from one note, you go 2 frets down is a whole step. Yeah, see, I would imagine on a guitar, as you're sliding around, that it's got to be a little trickier. On the keyboard, it is easy to see that pattern like right there because you see the black keys and the white keys, and you know, like every black key is a half step. When you're looking at a C major scale, you literally see whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step.
Yep.
It's the only way I could memorize it.
We start going the other way on the circle of fifths. We go from the C to the F. Gets you the 1 flat.
C to.
We change in the key of F that you're doing with the 1 sharp, or the 1 flat, I should say, which is B flat.
And that was this, right?
That was actually playing C. You started the C to the B flat, right? But if you started at F and went to the next F, but used the B flat and all the other white notes, so it's just the key of F with just the 1 flat.
F major.
Yep, F major. Yep.
Oh, and F major just has that 1 flat, huh?
Yep.
Funny, I never looked at F major that way, trying to go up like that. Again, when I tend to go to F major, I tend to start with that second inversion we were talking about. That's usually how I start my F majors, and then I always want to drop down to the C, and I always want to go up to the D, and then, okay, there's the B flat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice. It feels right.
Yeah, sounds right. And I've got like 3 songs that use that same combination in different ways. Yeah, I guess I do like F major. Didn't realize how much I actually use it.
Good to get comfortable with them, right?
What was that? What was that awesome sauce video you were talking about? The other one? Or was that
Yeah, let me see here.
me who mentioned that? I thought you had mentioned you'd seen another one from him that
Yeah, I was actually looking for it just now. Let me see what I got here. Was it creative sauce? I think that's what it was.
yeah, creative sauce. Why was I thinking awesome sauce? People always say
The
that.
videos are awesome.
Sauce.
Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, I hope I didn't tell Quinn awesome sauce. If I told her to search for that on YouTube, I might have accidentally done that.
I did find the other one from the guy we were just watching, Signals Music Studio, on the diminished chords, but that's like more of a something that you don't need all the time, but we should definitely check that out sometime.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna go check that out later because I am curious what his strategy is with that seventh. And
you can always use that in there, but
why,
it's just a
like,
different sound for sure.
Yeah, why it's considered more advanced, and why you selectively use that. Because those are the chords that I'm trying to discover at this point, getting beyond the basics.
One of the other big things was about drums, actually. The last one that I saw, or that we were talking about for creative sauce, we were talking about one of the how to program drums in Cakewalk.
Oh, he's got one on programming drums?
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's one I've dabbled with the little drum, the loop. There's different modes in Cakewalk, and if you change into certain modes, they're designed for either loop building or step programming. But
Mhm.
I never could get comfortable in it because there's still a few buttons and things that weren't like obvious to me. So I could never get into the groove of programming in Cakewalk. But I would imagine it's probably not that difficult.
Yeah. Now, this one gets into a whole lot of stuff. So it does have, timestamp set up for drum rolls and, rhythm types and adding the hi-hat, quantizing, kick and snare, like all these different sections. So it is like a half-hour long video, but we can, jump in and jump out at any time or pause it, what have you.
Yeah. Show me like the first time. What I'm really curious is to see like the basic, seeing it in action, because that's usually how I learn. If I see somebody do something in a piece of software, I just need to see how they approach it in the flow, and usually I figured it out that way. It's nice having somebody explaining as they're going along, but just seeing the mouse clicks tells me most of what I tend to need to know.
Let's see what we got.
Knowing how to program drum patterns is a great asset in the studio. And in this video, we're going to learn how I do it. Hi folks, I'm Mike, and I hope you're well. Creating your own drum patterns is a great skill to have in the studio. It means that you remain in control of your composition rather than it being directed by some presets which came with your drum plugin. Now, this is going to be my method of doing it. It doesn't mean you have to follow it exactly. There's many different ways you could go about this. But if you're just starting out, I recommend you kind of follow this method and then adapt it to your own needs later on. Now, I'm going to be doing this properly rather than quickly, and those two things are not always compatible. So I'm going to start off with a couple of key pieces of background information that I think really help you to understand why you're doing things. Now, notice I say key pieces of background information rather than theory, because if I'd said theory, a number of you would have run away already. In fact, some of you have. Anyway, let's get started by looking at drum rolls. Now, I don't mean drum rolls, I mean the rolls of drums. So let's take a look at the typical rolls of the various parts of our drum kit, starting off with the kick drum and the snare. Now, these two are often used together to form the basis of the beat, sounding something like this.
He's using Superior Drummer too.
Now, they're often used in combination with this over here. This is the hi-hat. Let's have a listen and see how that beat sounds now with the hi-hat, the kick, and the snare. Now, this is the most common combinations of parts of our kit which are formed to use the core rhythm or the core beat. Now, there's a slight exception to this,
Now
which I
he's
want to
playing
mention.
those with his.
Often the
He's playing those
hi-hat
on his
is
keyboard,
swapped
right?
out for the ride cymbal over here. Sometimes within the same song, a drummer will swap from one to the other to create a different
Not sure if it's
feel to
keyboard
the
or
beat.
if he's using
Let's
the
have a
finger on
listen
the
to the
pad.
same beat, but this time with the hi-hat swapped out for the ride.
Probably keyboard.
So
Yeah, well, you
we've
can
got
use
the
your
ride
computer
symbol there, but we've got a
keyboard.
whole bunch of
Every
other
one of those
symbols.
is
Now, the
mapped to a
other
letter.
symbols are
Yep.
often used for accents rather than being used as a main part of the rhythm. Let's just have a listen to the selection we've got here. Now, they can be used in any way you wish to accent certain parts of the song. However, they're often used right at the beginning of sections to sort of punctuate the beginning. Let's have a listen to that in action. So that's the key drums there, the kick, the snare, the hi-hat, the ride, and then the cymbals. What about fills? Well, more often than not, we use a combination of toms, which you can see here, and sometimes also the kick and the snare for fills as well. But let's just focus on the toms for now. Now, they're often used to lead up to the beginning of a section, okay? And to sort of punctuate those in combination with cymbals as well. So let's have a listen to those as they lead into our section. Now, of course, I have just talked about the very typical roles of these drums, but there's lots and lots of examples in famous pieces of music where they're used in different ways. For example, actually, especially the floor toms can often be used to hold down the core rhythm, okay? And sometimes some of the other cymbals are used to keep sort of a regular rhythm as well. They're not just used on accents. So there's all different kinds of ways these drums can be used, but these are the most typical uses in contemporary music. So here we're going to create two drum rhythms, both at the same speed, so 70 beats per minute, and both with 4 beats per bar, sounding like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's get rid of that click track and just add a hi-hat to each of those beats. It's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's do something different to each of them now. With the first one, I'm going to take each of those main beats and divide it by 2. With the second one, I'm going to take each of those main beats and divide it by 3. You can see the grid lines here to reflect that. Now I'm going to place hi-hats on each of those grid lines. So the first one is going to sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and okay. Now the second one sounds like this. 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then. So it's kind of helpful to count along in that kind of way with the two different rhythms. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then with the second one, 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then. That may become a little bit more important later on. Okay, so moving on, let's now add a snare drum to the second and fourth beats of each of these rhythms. And
they're
then
both in the
let's
same beats
add
per
some
minute.
kick drums.
They're both in the same beats per minute. The thing is, the bottom one is triplets. So the bottom one is putting the 3 notes in the place where you normally have the 2. So that's why you're in the top, you've got the 1 and 2, and the bottom you get the 1 and then 2. But there would also be, if you broke it up even further, you could put up one in between all the ones on the top too.
Yeah.
And then you'd end up with the 1 E and
broke up the grid.
Yeah, the grids are the same top and bottom though, so that he's keeping it so that you can see what's going on in each of them. But in the bottom, it's the triplets instead of the middles.
or bass drums, depending which part of the world you come from. And we're going to add those to different points, but we're going to make sure they're on the grid lines, okay? That's important. So the first one has those 8 different grid lines. The second one has 12 different grid lines because we divided each of the 4 beats by 3. So let's have a listen now to the first one. And the second one. So you can hear they sound distinctly different, okay? Well, let's add some instrument to that. So we're going to add to each of these a very familiar sounding guitar pattern, which fits each of them. So the first one sounds like this. And the second one sounds like this. So even though they're both in 4/4 and they're both at 70 beats
funny,
per
I wasn't
minute,
thinking that was
they
going to be
sound
blues
quite different
at
in
first.
terms of their rhythm properties. Have a listen to the first one again. Okay, and the second one. So what if we took the guitar part from the first one and swapped it with the guitar part from the second one? So we're mixing up the kind of rhythm properties of the instrument and the actual drums. First of all, let's listen now to our first rhythm. Can you hear how it almost sounds in time, but not quite? It's as if the rhythm is kind of loose and a little bit out of time there. That's because we've taken that guitar part, which is being divided basically into 3 parts for each beat, and we've mixed it up with the drum part, which is being divided by 2 parts for each beat, okay? They don't quite fit together. Now let's have a listen to the second one.
So it's all about where the accent hits are.
Yep, the accent hits.
Now this gets a little bit complicated because that doesn't quite fit together, but you may sometimes creatively do that. It's not unknown for someone to be playing a straight rhythm and then for a drummer to play in triplets over the top. So you may want to do it creatively, but let's just say simply at the moment,
Well,
it doesn't
that second
quite
one would
fit
just be
together.
considered like
now, it's
progressive
important
rock.
to understand the
Progressive
difference
blues.
between these 2 types of rhythms.
And the two of them
for
kind of
most
acting
contemporary
independently.
music, there is that basic difference. There is 4/4 rhythms, if you like, which have divisions of 2, and you can subdivide by 2 again, of course, and there's those which have divisions of 3. Normally, instrument parts which have that division of 3 and drum parts which have that division by 2 don't quite fit together. Now, how do you know when you're first starting out whether that guitar part or that piano part you've already written has those divisions? Well, I find it helpful to do that counting we were doing earlier. So with the first one, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and with the second type of counting, 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4, and then if you count along with your instrument part which you've already written, if it doesn't seem to quite fit with one or the other, then that's a good indication. Other than that, a little bit of trial and error. Now that's important in terms of constructing your drum parts, but it also becomes important to have this little bit of knowledge when you come to quantizing, something that we're going to cover a little bit later on.
Oh, yes.
Oh, by the way, if you're finding this video useful, could you go ahead and hit the
quantizing
like
could
button
mess
for me?
this
Do it
up
right
if,
away so that you don't forget. And if you do like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so that you're notified about my other videos. Now we're going to move on to a real world scenario. I've got a guitar
like 'em
part
every
and I want to
time.
create some drums for it. And this is a key thing in my approach. The drums are working with the existing composition. This is what makes this method so cool. Now, I know that some of you can play whole drum parts on your keyboard or on drum pads, and I'm not that skilled at that, so I like to break it down into
I don't
different
like doing it that way.
sections. That just makes things easier to manage, and I can treat them a little bit differently. So we're going to start off by adding the hi-hat. So I'm using Cakewalk today, but it doesn't really matter which DAW you use. The principles are just the same. It's just some of the details about how we go about things which are a little bit different. Now you can see here that I've got a guitar part loaded up. This is my reference for my drum
Okay, that's
pattern.
actually
Now
what
I
I
don't
wanted to see.
always go ahead and record things like a guitar part up front. Sometimes it's just in my head and I use what's in my head as a reference. But assuming that you're not mind readers, I've put it here for you today so you know what I'm referring to. Now, before I play it, I just want to point out there's some distinct sections to this. Right at the beginning here, there's a sort of fairly repetitive pattern. Then it changes here for a little while in this section here. Then it goes back to the original pattern here, and then again changes towards the end. So let's start off by listening to it and listen for the first change, which is here. And it's those variations in a piece of music that really makes me want to write custom drum parts. It then feels
Can
like
you
the
hit
whole
pause
thing
for a
is sort
second
of
there?
cohesive and a real.
Yeah, right there. That's perfect. What I wanted to see when he first went in, because he's got the time syncing locked. Notice in the top next to the control surface that orange circle box.
Mhm.
You know the whether you lock your time signature,
Right.
and he's got it set to 1/8.
So he's locking to the eighth notes.
That's the key to, yeah, that's the key to making sure that everything snaps. And when you drop if you're going to do step programming here and you want to have the amount of ticks that he needed between that sample 1 and sample 2, depending on how you're locking there is the difference between example 1 and example 2.
Right. Whether it was eighth or the other one would probably be 1/6.
Because example 2 has the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. No, that was the first example, right? The 1 and 2, and that was basically
That would have
like
8. Actually, the second one would
clock
have
ticking.
12 then. So it was like the first one was 8 and the second one would be 12.
So it's the 1/8 that he chose to get that grid, right? And
Right,
1/16
8 notes.
ticks. Or what does that say? Is that 36? 136 ticks?
Where's that?
Over
Oh,
on
over
the
there.
left there?
It says 135
Next,
next to the 1/8.
135 ticks. So that's how many ticks are in the measure then, right? All those micro little ticks that you see in the timeline, there's 135 of them?
For that one, I'm not sure what the 135 ticks is. It sounds more like it's just a finer measure of how long the measure is. Like it might be saying that a measure is 135 ticks long. If they're
Oh, it might not
different
actually have, yeah, just how precise you could select into, because all of that is part of the grid lock, you know. So if you don't want to accidentally, because if you turn it off, you can literally click anywhere down to, you know, the microest level, but sync lock is normally good to have on. When I turn it
Right.
off, it's for a reason, because I want to edit something like a WAV file and I want to cut something a little off the measure.
There's a good chance
But
he
when
points
I'm
out some of that when
programming
he's going through it as well. I
laying
don't
down
recall
a
if
track,
he did about ticks and about the
well,
locking.
seeing what he did, seeing how he's got it set there now makes me understand his second example better, and how when you're programming your drums, looking for that different kind of grid that gives you 12 boxes instead of 8 is a matter of starting here.
Yep. And even down when you're using the different notes, whether it's eighth notes, quarter notes, half notes, and then there's the triplets, whether you're making them into
Yeah.
a triplet.
Yeah, once you've got your heartbeat, because that's what he set when he decided I want to do the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And what was the second one? 1, 2, 3, 4. Or
One and then
he had
one
he
and
had
then 2 and then
hits.
3.
1 and then 1 and then 1 and then.
real piece of music played by a real band. If you play sort of preset parts, then it can all sort of feel a little bit manufactured. So I'm going to start off by recording the hi-hat. Now, you can record all of your drum parts in one track, but I've elected to actually record some of them on separate tracks. It makes it a little bit easier for you to see what
MIDI
I'm doing.
drummers
And also, I
like to
do
keep 'em
sometimes
separated
do
like
it
this.
in that way.
That would be
I'm going
my.
to
I
start
would go
off
that
with
way
this
too.
hi-hat. So I'm just going to back the playhead up to around about
Well,
the
you build
bar
it that way,
before
and then when you're
actually
done,
the guitar starts
consolidate
there.
it.
And I'm just going to go ahead and play the hi-hat notes from my MIDI keyboard. So that's a successful take, or good enough for now. Now you can see that the main thing that we can see in terms of variation, I mean, the beats will be
It's
slightly
all a
on and off the
metronome
beat,
at
but the
this
main
point.
thing we can see in variation is the velocities there. That's really important. I think that's a part of what gives it a more natural feel. If we just recorded some small
And that's why
section
he
here and then
prefers to
copied
use
and
his MIDI
pasted it across,
controller.
it would all sound
Yeah,
very
Because a
familiar
computer
to the
keyboard has
listener
no
as the
velocity.
song goes on. So I actually like to record large sections like that, even though it's a little tedious, or sometimes I even record the whole song just on the hi-hat like that, just to make sure there's sort of no real repetition in it. Now, you don't always hit the right velocities when you have your performance, so you may want to go ahead right away and adjust some of the velocities. I think just here where that guitar did change, I think this note could just be a little louder, just
And
like
there's some
these
cool
four
cal
here. They
scripts.
match the
You know those
pattern
cal
of what the
scripts that they're
guitar's
getting
doing
rid of?
there. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
There's some cool ones that will humanize velocity.
Right.
Now you could go ahead and fiddle, but I think that's going to be good enough for me for now. The next thing I want to do is just make sure the timing is nice and tidy, especially for the hi-hat.
This is your current dog food.
Yeah, you don't
And
want a
this is
sloppy
Ollie.
hi-hat.
See the difference?
No,
So you can see the notes
Unless
here are
you're,
sitting
like,
pretty close to
playing
the
punk.
grid, which means
If
my
you're playing,
timing
like, a certain
wasn't
genre,
too bad today, but some other
it's part
days
of the
it
sound.
really
That's built
isn't
in.
that great. And also if you're dealing with things like latency, it can be quite off. So it's a good idea at this stage to tidy up, especially with the hi-hat, which creates a kind of
Another
a
reason to use
framework
a MIDI
for the other
MIDI
drums
keyboard
to
or
sit
controller.
around in most cases. So
Zero
I'm going to go
latency.
ahead and tidy things up. Now I could do it manually, so I just could grab notes like so and just start to drag them around closer to the grid. That probably wouldn't help that much today since they all are pretty close to the grid, but sometimes that can be a good way to approach it, just when you've got the odd one or two notes which are just, you know, more off of the grid than
This
you
is
want
where
them to
quantize
be. The
them
other thing you
clean
may
it
want
up.
to do is deal with things in bulk, and most stores have what is called a quantize feature for that. So a quantize feature will tidy up those notes and put them on the grid or close to the grid. We'll talk about that in a moment. But first of all, let me just select all of my notes here like so. And then in Cakewalk here, I press
And that's
Q on the
great
keyboard
if you
to bring
really
up
want
the
that.
quantized
But
dialog
if you
box.
do have
Now,
an
the first thing that's
off-time,
important is to select
something
the
that's
correct
meant to be off,
resolution.
Yeah, it'll
quantizing
mess,
breaks
it'll
it.
mess you up. And that's where you got to use it carefully, or use it on only sections that you want, or be
And-
prepared to manually fix the other parts later.
Yeah. Well, in the resolution, right here, this resolution, if you don't want to break something that's in a like small snippet of a beat, the resolution can make it so that the only thing that quantizes is the big beats, not the little ones.
I was thinking more
He's-
of it,
right now he's
more
set
of
to
as a
1/8.
so basically anything, it'll quantize to eighth note, so everything will lock onto an eighth note. But if you had something that was in between, like you're saying, you could have it set to either 16 or even 32.
You can
If you had it set
you
to
could
snap to 32, then-
quantize. You could quantize down to the you could quantize down to the micro time.
Yep.
But
to get it right where you
that
want
would
it.
make everything so precise, assuming that like you actually did want that. A lot of hits don't come on the perfect, measure. Some of the songs sometimes that I do stuff, it's like you hit a note before the hit and
That's
lead
actually
into something.
One thing that you could do right there is with the offset, where there's
Quantizing
the
like that
offset for the
breaks
ticks
that.
over here. You could offset it by plus or minus so many ticks. So they do have a couple ways they can look at it, and you have an
Oh,
audition option here.
you, this is another way to auto calibrate your latency, because if you had a MIDI controller that you knew had latency, normally you shouldn't. Like going back to MIDI 2, any decent MIDI controller should have zero latency these days. But if you did have a controller that was getting like 0.25 millisecond latency through it, you can auto fix that latency using quantizing, assuming you're doing MIDI. You're not recording the audio. If you do it as MIDI, then you can sync it and then render it as audio. Turn the MIDI into the instrument.
Yep, and any instrument.
This is an
change the
auto
instrument.
latency option.
Another good place.
And
to
I'm
know
sure
where to
there's a
find
way to do this with waves. With the Focusrites, fortunately, the Focusrites don't tend to have any latency, but with some of the other audio interfaces out there that might have that like 0.25, 0.50 latency, I bet you quantizing will do the same thing for wave tracks too, and slide it back 0.25 every time you record a track with quantizing turned on that wave track.
Mhm.
I'd be curious to see if that can do that on audio clips. And it does say something about audio clip start times there. So
Yeah.
that is exactly how you would compensate for it. Wow. I just answered my own question from last night.
Nice. I love when that
Works in
happens.
MIDI. There's no reason why it wouldn't work in audio. Yeah, the offset that you have here. I mean, you can force a wave file to offset a certain amount of milliseconds. Then
I also wonder what we have
that
at the top here.
device, that hardware latency latencycycy never happens.
I see the drop down at the top that's blank, but I wonder what you have there for. Is that presets? So you could have different ones set, like you're saying. So you have one that's an offset of a certain amount
Yeah.
and have that as a preset value.
You get all this some way that you're happy. It's a custom quantizing for your Casio. Let's say your Casio had a little latency, older MIDI USB. If you made adjustments here to deal with that, you hit the disk one and you'll save it. And when you save it, then it'll be there to preload when you come back.
Yeah, sweet. Let's see what he's got.
Over here. Now, I did play 1/8 notes on the hi-hat, meaning each bar was divided into eighths. So this is already the correct resolution, but I may have played faster notes or slower
And that's
notes,
why
in which case I
his
would
sync
pick the
was
most
set to
suitable
1/8.
resolution. Now, remember earlier we talked about things.
That was important too with the triplets that you just saw there. I don't know if you saw that or not, but they had the
Yep.
where you could see like all the different values, including the triplets for all the different fields. You could have it locked to a. That's how we did it before, like the eighth notes for the first one, and then eighth note triplet field for the second one, and that's how we got the 12.
Select the correct resolution over here. Now, I did play 1/8 notes on the hi-hat, meaning each bar was divided into eighths. So this is already the correct resolution, but I may have played faster notes or slower notes, in which case I would pick the most suitable resolution. Now, remember earlier we talked about things being either divided by 2 or divided by 3. This is where this becomes very, very important. If you have a basic division of 3, then you may be wanting to use the triplet selections here. Now, in Cakewalk it says triplet. In some other doors it may just have a little letter T or be symbolized in another way. But that's why understanding that principle is extremely important when it comes to using the quantize feature. Now, you can just go ahead and experiment. Sometimes it won't go well and you'll just have to undo and try a different setting. Now, the other setting, which is really important, is something called strength, or at least here in Cakewalk it's called strength. This is a setting which controls how close to each grid line it's actually going to push that note to. Now, if we have it on 100% like so, and I click on OK, you'll have seen the notes shuffle around there, and now they're all exactly on the grid line. Now, you may or may not want that, depending on the genre of music and how natural you want it to feel. I
How
like,
mechanical
for this type
you
of
want it to
music,
sound.
to use something less
Techno?
than 100%. So I'll open the
That
quantize box
European-
again, and I'll go to a strength. Let's just go to, say, 80. That should be fine. So I'll just click on OK for that to happen. You saw them shuffle around. Now, they may look as though they're exactly on the grid, but they're not. I
That's
could
another
try
way
different
of
settings, but I'm happy with that.
humanizing.
Yep. Basically anti-quantizing. Like you quantize it to get
Even
them all
even
perfect
with
and then
yeah,
break it,
and
back it off.
ironic. It's ironic that you have to anti-quantize your quantization so it doesn't sound mechanical. Unless you were doing like that European hip hop crazy trap stuff where you wanted a mechanical sound.
And even like he was talking about the hits and how hard they are in the bottom, the velocities. Having those in a varying the way they are is important as well, because then you definitely hear that when it's coming through. Like some are definitely getting hit harder than softer, and that makes it sound more humid already, even if the timing was locked in.
Yeah.
For now.
That's why some
That's
of those metal
really
drums, when they're being
important
programmed,
stage.
they program those crazy double basses, but they're all at 127.
Right. All 100%.
Yeah.
And it depends on the style, and it depends on how long it's going as well. Like in sections, that's great.
What you're trying to accomplish with that double bass that like they sometimes do. Machine gun metal.
Yep. We should still talk to those guys about how they program that stuff as well. Would be another interesting evening on here.
Oh,
going
yeah,
over
yeah.
how they get those plugged in.
Well, Jason, believe me, I am working on Jason to show me his superior drummer tricks. He's as impressive of a drum programmer as he is the guitarist, the singer. Best drum programming I've seen anybody on here do for the complex, progressive kinds of things that.
And the results, the way they sound at the end.
Superior drummer too.
Nice.
He's using the same engine that we're watching in action here.
Very cool.
It's a good sampler.
And I like the way that he's breaking it down also, just by each instrument or by each part, to be able to treat each one differently with the effects as well as timing.
What's real curious is he's using the piano roll. I thought he was going to use there's a loop mode. When you go look at the cakewalk modes that you have, there is one designed specifically for this kind of beat making, where all these drums he's making across there, if they are repetitive, building the single measure loop that you reuse every time you need it, in the long run, that's how you construct a song real simply. Because there's going to be some repetition in these drums.
Yeah, that's what he was addressing that earlier, but he was saying that he likes to do these long sections like this so that it doesn't have any repetition in there, because it is everything's going to be that little bit off or a little bit harder or softer on the velocity.
And if you do want distinction across your whole song, you don't want to loop your pattern and next time it plays it sounds exactly the same. You want to do something to make that second part sound a little different than the first one. You can do that even with the loops.
But I could see the value in each way of
modulations that you can do. Well, the nice
there would
thing
be times
is
that
it's
you
all
want the small
MIDI.
loop. Yep. So you have control of the velocities and a lot of control over everything.
Yeah, it's curious to see his approach.
Yeah.
With the hi-hat in making sure it's nice and tidy. So next I'm going to add the kick and the snare. This is where our rhythm's really going to start to come together. Now the snare part for me is pretty
much
obvious.
Goes in the order.
If I listen to the guitar part,
Drummers
the accents
do that.
are on the second
the
and the fourth
kick,
beat. Now that's
snare.
very, very typical for contemporary music. They don't have to be on the second and fourth beats, and some of the most interesting rhythms don't have them there, but in this case it does seem the most suitable thing. I'll play the track and I'll show you what I mean by just playing the snare. I think you'll hear what I mean there. That's just where it's naturally going to be sitting. Now, the kick isn't quite so straightforward. The kick is certainly going to be on the first beat of each bar, but beyond that, there's lots of different variations we could do. Now, what you actually decide to do will depend on your own creativity, what you're looking for, and your own particular piece of music. In this case, I would also be thinking about what my bass guitar part is going to be, and either I will try and write a kick pattern which is going to fit in with that, or I'll write a kick pattern I like, and when I write the bass guitar part, I'll fit in with the kick somewhat. You don't have to be exact. Now, I'm going to just give you a demonstration on some of the things I could do with the most basic one first. That's one of them. Let's try something different. You get the idea. There's a few different things you could do with that kick. I am going to stick with the most basic one for now, and we'll look at some variations later. Let's record them. Now that was very, very basic. Sometimes I will record things more complex than that rather than go in and edit, but just so you guys can see what my approach would be in terms of adding some embellishment to this, I've recorded the most basic version and I'll add the embellishments in a moment. But the first thing I'm going to do before I do that is tidy things up again. So I'm just going to click on my track there where I've just recorded, click on Q on my keyboard, bring up that quantize window. I'm just going to leave the same settings, yeah, 1/8 notes and on 80% strength. Click on OK. And there was some slightly shoddy playing in there, so that may have helped me. I'll just give it a quick listen. Yeah, I think that's working quite well, but it would be nice to have some more sort of human types of variation in there. Let's take a look at that next. So at this stage, I just want to make that kick and snare pattern a little bit more exciting or a little bit more natural by adding in a few notes, which aren't as quite as important as these other ones, but they're going to play a nice role, as I say, in making things sound a little bit more natural and have a bit more variation. Let's start off with the kick here, okay? Now, you may have an idea in your head where you want those extra beats to be, or you may just want to experiment. That's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to throw in a new kick beat here on the grid, just on that second note there, you can see that, and I'll just make sure with this that the velocity's down fairly low. With these sort of extra notes, they're sometimes called grace notes, you want to make sure that the velocity is down pretty low. Okay, let's just have a listen to that. Okay, that's fine. A little bit boring actually, so I'm just going to move it to a different spot up here. Let's have a listen to this. That's fine. I could copy that and make it the same, I guess, over here. Maybe add another one in here, and I'll just bring the velocity down a little bit. Let's have a listen to those two bars. That's okay. Again, I would just adjust the velocities there. You get the idea. You can really just experiment here. Now, sometimes, of course, less is more and you don't need all of this. But if you do just want to create that little bit of variation in your rhythms, this is a fun way to go about it. I'll actually drag that one up there instead of keeping it there. Let's have a listen to that bar. You get the idea, so it's not quite so monotonous. Now, you could create regular patterns out of this,
Kind of
or you
like
could, as I say, just go
peppering
ahead and randomly put some
it.
things in there.
Throwing in
I'd
the
leave
spice,
that
yeah.
up to you in your creativity, but it is fun to
Yeah.
experiment in this way.
Sonic
Now, I
cookie.
could do the same thing with the snare. In fact, it's even better with the snare in terms of grace
And that
notes.
is something,
So let's
that
just
is the
try
benefit
something
of
here.
step
I'll
programming
just
like
put
this.
one in here, okay?
You can pepper like that without having to redo a track and
Yeah.
physically pepper it.
It's also why it's important to, when you're doing the recording, if you have this kind of editing in mind, you can do a much more basic pattern where normally while you're playing, you're like, oh, this is boring, I should do it differently. But if you just do that same boring thing and just keep it nice and tight and get it on the grid, then you can just add the little embellishments later and make it as interesting as you want.
Yeah, I really need to start doing my songwriting this way. Start with that damn metronome.
Yep.
I have
And
been
work out from there.
pushing the metronome into my brain for the last, yeah, I have to make my future recordings on. I need to use the snap. I want things to be on the proper time at the proper hits. And in the old days, I just turned the metronome off and would record.
And you get what you get. Yep. But then you get a more human experience on the,
Yeah.
the way it comes out.
It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to construct though. Like I'm trying to like write the songs and put them all together and get that like i- even if I do record it live or do something afterwards more natural to get the natural sound, I want to get that like constructed song in all its parts in the best version of it that I can make.
Makes sense.
In
Get a
time
little bit louder.
so that each
Let's
one of the
see how
tracks
that
can be
part
passed
now
off to
sounds.
everybody else and everything stays synchronized.
It all stays locked in. Yeah. Because that is the trick, especially when we're working
Yeah,
with other
especially
artists,
when
is
you're
making sure
dealing
everyone's locked in.
or just MIDI and audio tracks. If you've got something with MIDI and audio tracks, synchronization is even more important.
Definitely.
It's okay, but it's not exactly what I want. To get what I want, I'm actually going to have to increase the resolution. So I'm going to change it from 1/8 notes up to, let's try this, 1/16 notes here. And let's just shuffle that little snare
Oh, he can
beat
change his
over there
resolution over
just
on the
by
right.
one step. Now let's have a listen.
You could do that over on the right. Or that it showed whether it was active or not. I never go in this mode. I mean, the only time I've gone into the piano roll typically is to try to figure out what notes were getting played in a MIDI track. What's he playing?
Right. It looks like they also are showing on the far left there which things are on which part of the piano roll and which key you have it mapped to and all that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's useful as shit because if you know this is your hi-hat key on your keyboard, then you always hit that key because you know it's your hi-hat key. I have the bass and drums memorized, but all the other ones, there's a lot of fucking drums on a kit. 127.
Things that make Tony's brain go boom. I love that loop that you're doing, guys. I
Oh
think we
yeah,
should
that was
start it
wild.
out again. I
Starting a fresh loop.
think that's how we'll start out again.
Oh, Ange, we found how to get you verified, and we're gonna do it
Oh yeah?
on
Okay.
BandLab. Yeah, Glenn found it
How's
in
that?
like fucking seconds. Actually, after this video, Glenn,
Oh.
let's go get ready for what we need to know to do all that. What the requirements are, because there's actually a bunch of them. He was telling me some of them earlier.
Yep. We'll go
Okay.
check it out.
That's a good deal. We'll do it after the show.
Yep.
I've been fucking searching for that for like 4 months, and Glenn literally like fucking found it in like 3 minutes.
It's all about that searching.
I know.
A logical approach. I mean,
So if I was that
I never went
information,
to
where
the
would I be?
BandLab help page either. Well, I've been to their help page, but I never like really went looking through their help docs because I was always trying to find a fucking contact. I wanted to send something to support, and they don't advertise their support at bandlab.com. But that
Yeah.
is the
All right,
address.
we're starting to come back up here.
I'd actually never tried to. I'd never gotten to the help page either until I started looking for this for today.
I have been there before for fucking some of the mobile audio ones when some people were having problems, but again, I never thought about searching for how to get verified. It is just about the search term that you approach you take. Oh, don't do a purposeful loop. That's not as fun. It's got to be a real one. It's better than the zoom loops, though. Those can get like ear piercing. We had one the other night that was like, whoa. Jason was turning on his fucking Focusrite and getting his mic and his guitar, and they were looping back in, and
It got ugly.
yeah, I thought it was going to blow my headphones at one point.
So I know where your mute buttons are and get to them quick.
That's why I like having a mute on every channel. That fucking Mackie was the best investment I've done in the last 2 years. Did she turn into a pumpkin? Pre-pumpkin?
Working the loop out.
Maybe
All right, I
she
couldn't. I
turned
couldn't
into a
resist.
monkey.
All right, we are back now. We're talking Shh IT with Tony and Glenn. Take it away, boys.
Exactly. Where did we leave off now? I think we were in the middle of the drum patterns there, and he was just about to switch the grid from the 8th to the 16th.
Yes, which is
So
necessary in order to get what he wants here.
I think that's right about here.
The idea, so it's not quite so monotonous. Now, you could create regular patterns out of this, or you could, as I say, just go ahead and randomly put some things in there. I'd leave that up to you in your creativity, but it is fun to experiment in this way. Now, I can do the same thing with the snare. In fact, it's even better with the snare in terms of grace notes. So let's just try something here. I'll just put one in here, okay? Make it a little bit louder. Let's see how that bar now sounds. It's okay, but it's not exactly what I want. To get what I want, I'm actually going to have to increase the resolution. So I'm going to change it from 1/8 notes up to, let's try this, 1/16 notes here. And let's just shuffle that little snare beat over there just by one step. Now let's have a listen. Yeah, I love that sort of thing. I'm just going to do that again down here. Let's have a listen. Okay, that one was a little bit, okay, maybe not, with a lower velocity maybe.
Kind of getting that splashy snare.
It could work for different songs. Don't really like it that much, but you know, you get the idea.
A little
Play
shuffle.
around with it, experiment with it, and just put those extra little sort of beats in there to create that nice bit of variation, as if the drummer's just not doing the same thing every single time. Now, another thing that you can do, which does work quite well with snare beats, is what they call flams. This is where, again, you have two beats, but they're close to each other, but not on the grid. They're much closer together than that. I'll just zoom in here. I'll just move it along a little bit.
Interesting.
Let's take this
He's
extra
going
note
into
we had
snare
here. I'm just going to
techniques.
drag it.
Now
So I'm
that
just going to turn
is
snap off. I'm just going to drag it back. So
it's a music
right
lesson
next
on
to
top
this
of a tech
note here. Let's have a
lesson.
listen.
Yeah, the flams are good.
I don't know if you heard that there, but that's called a flam. You need to adjust the velocities a little bit to get the right effect, but usually they're going
I
to
like
be
knowing
really
what it's
close
called.
together like that, and you get that sort of sound. And that's another really nice bit of variation.
It almost
that you
makes it
can
feel
put
like
in
they're
there
using
to make your
bongos.
drum sound a little bit more natural. I'm going to go ahead
With
and
that
do
secondary
that
hit.
by myself
It gives
now,
it
and
like
I'll
a
catch
bongo.
you in the next segment.
Yeah, it gives it a
I get
bongo
further
kind
and
of
further in.
echo.
By the time I hit the 90 days, I had lost right at 30 pounds, and my jeans
Okay, so I'm now going to go
30
ahead and add some
pounds.
accents with various cymbals, starting off with actually the hi-hat. The hi-hat has another option to it normally, which is the open hi-hat sound. And this is a special sort of note within most
Now,
plugins for drums where
this is another
where the
drum
note actually
technique
interacts with
that
the other notes which control
I've
the
had a hard
regular
time
hi-hat sound.
grasping.
What I mean is you can play an open
The
hi-hat,
closed
yeah, like
hi-hat
so.
open.
But if you play that and follow it up with a
Yeah, trying to get the open hi-hat is tough. I mean, that's for me, that's one of the big things that I'm lacking if I set the
Oh,
drum kit is getting that fourth thing really, because to me that's the fourth thing. Like I can keep the foot down on the hi-hat and just keep the closed hi-hat all day, but to try to throw in just an open hi-hat now and then really messes me all up.
yeah. The key to a true great drummer is mastering that open closed relationship.
The other thing that was like you normally you see somebody there they're constantly just sitting there on the on the hi-hat with the running the main rhythm on the closed hi-hat. You can also do that just with that pedal, like just by closing it instead. So you can actually free up that hand from having to always be over there by just clamping down with the hi-hat on that you know on that eighth note or 16th note as you need it. There's just a way of like
Yeah,
freeing
and
you up to do rolls and everything else.
this is where being human is easier to get what you're looking for. It's
It definitely takes a lot
trickier
of
trying to.
practice.
Oh yeah, and trying to accomplish it with step programming like this is actually hard to be human there.
That's where seeing him do it and seeing like the result that he gets from it and hearing what it sounds like makes you realize that like if I were trying to do it from scratch and hadn't watched this beforehand, it would have been really tough, especially with getting things on the right spots on the grid, getting things quantized easily to get things started and the main structure and all that. But and then adding all the
Yeah,
little accents to
I'm
really
I'm seeing
humanize it.
what's really nice is just seeing his approach. Um,
Yeah.
this is all I needed to see was like, okay, he loaded up the piano roll, he hit record on a MIDI track and hit one key. That's my hi-hat key, and he laid out one thing and then added the next one. I see the workflow.
Yeah, and since you already use things that you think a lot of things with busing, as far as you're going to get the right effects on each of them, having them all in the same same reverb on all of them, all that kind of stuff. Like you're already doing all of that stuff to make it where you can make the kit cohesive. Because it would be easy to do that the wrong way too. Like if you just treated each one individually too much, you could make it so that the drum kit doesn't sound like it's all in the same place anymore.
Yeah. Well, the beauty right now is this is all MIDI data. So if I decided I didn't like this superior drum kit, like I used it to build this drum beat, but if I decided I wanted to use a different kit, you can change to all the different superior drum kits. You can MIDI track, you can route it to a different sampler. All of this is completely reusable with different sounds. I could put on an orchestra drum kit.
Yep. Or a metal drum kit.
Yeah, well, turn
Which
that into a timpani.
cool.
regular hi-hat sound, it makes the sound of that hi-hat closing. You don't hear both at the same time. Yeah, one kills off the other. So I'm going to let my original hi-hat play, but I'm going to play some open hi-hats in there just to add some accents. Let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so you heard what was happening there. I'm just going to grab what I did there and I'm just going to right click here in Cakewalk and go to bounce the clips so that they're all on the same line. You can see those open hi-hats there. Okay, now I could go ahead and quantize those. I suppose I'll do that now. I don't really probably need to, but hey, let's do it anyway. So that's that done. The next thing I'm going to do is add in some accents for cymbals. I'm going to do it right at the beginning. I'm going to have a cymbal crash in the first beat, but I'll do it in some other places as well. Now, I'm actually going to record this on the same track where I recorded this hi-hat. There's a reason for that, which I'll explain in a moment.
Now,
I
the
have
crashes
renamed the
are
track
kind of
over here to
fun.
hi-hat and cymbals. So let's go ahead and just record those cymbal crashes starting now.
I like doing the crash cymbals.
Okay, so again, I'm just going to grab all of those in Cakewalk, right click, bounce the clips so that they're all there together. We can see the cymbals down here. Now, the main reason I've put this on the same track is I actually don't
And
want the
that's
cymbal
exactly what
crashes
I needed
and
to
a
see what he
hi-hat
was
to
doing
happen
right there.
at the same time. I'm not sure if you can sort of do, you can do that on the drums, but it doesn't feel quite natural to me. So I usually get rid of hi-hats where a cymbal is playing. So I'll do that now. I'll just delete that hi-hat there where that cymbal's playing. I'll delete it here. Now, I have to be a bit careful because this open hi-hat, which we can see here, is going to remain open. So I've got a couple of choices here. I could get rid of that, or I could move this one closer. Let's just see how that sounds. It could be interesting. No, I don't like that at all. Let's not do that. Instead, I think I'll just get rid of both of them. Okay, so I'll get rid of that. I'll actually get rid of that open hi-hat. Let's have a listen. Okay, that's all good. And again, I'll do the same thing down here. Get rid of this open hi-hat, get rid of this hi-hat, and I'll just leave the final crash there at the end. Okay, that's working just fine for me. So that's the general idea with cymbals. And as I say, the main principle that I follow is I just don't have them playing at the same time as the hi-hat. You don't
That
have
was a
to
nice
follow that
basic
as a
drum beat.
rule. If it sounds okay to you, keep it like that.
With
Now, if
all
you
the
remember
necessary
earlier, I
drum
talked about the fact that the hi-hat could
philosophy.
All the
be
components it
swapped
needed,
out in
yep.
some cases with a ride
Yep.
cymbal. I just wanted to give you a quick demonstration of that. I've got our
He
same
is
part here.
great at
In the
breaking it
first
down.
half, I'm using a hi-hat. In the second part, I'm using a ride cymbal. I just want you to appreciate the difference in feel
You can
when
see the
you do
velocity
that. Let's have
difference
a
on
listen.
the ride there.
Yeah. Sounds like a Brian Emerson song.
Yeah.
Now, it's a bit beyond the scope of this tutorial to talk about the really fancy parts, the frills and the fills, if you like. If you'd like me to make a tutorial about some more advanced things to do with beat making or drum beat
Yes,
making, then let me
very
know about
much.
that in the comments down below. Now, I have
Gonna
added a couple of frills
have
and
to let
fills
him
to
know.
this, mostly using a combination of kick and snare for some fills and tom-toms for others. So, for example, just as an intro, I've used this little beat between
the
the kick and the
toms.
snare here.
That's
Something
the one I was
typical
actually
for me,
curious
at least.
about.
I don't know how many other people do
How
it.
he
Sounds
would
like
approach
this.
those. Yeah.
And then a little further on, if we go down here and I scroll this around, you can see there's some toms here. Now, just as a rule of thumb, when you do tom fills, they normally go from high to low. Of course, there's no rules with this. If you can make it sound good with different variations. But as a starting point, if you're just starting out, generally we start off with the high toms and work our way up, work our way down. Now, with toms, I try not to quantize them at all, personally. I like those to sound really natural. And being
That's
a little
not where you want.
behind or ahead of the beat can sometimes sound really good with tom fill. So I generally, unless they're really, really bad, I don't quantize them at all. And if they are really bad, I'll just generally adjust them manually. That's the very quick guide to those fills and frills. Now, obviously, in this video, I've used a lot of generalizations in terms of the rhythms and also the rolls of the drums. Of course, the world is your oyster in terms of creativity. And indeed, outside of contemporary music, with other forms of music, some of this stuff doesn't quite apply. If you'd like me to make a video about some of the more advanced techniques, and particularly how I get these drums to sound even more natural, could you let me know in the comments down below? If I get enough of you asking for it, then I'll definitely go ahead and make that video. Now, while you're down there, check out the link in the description for my patreon.com, where for as little as $1 per month, you can help me help you by making more videos like this. And I'll see you in the next video.
Wow. I wonder what he puts in his Patreon. See, $1 a month? Shit, man. I will become a Patreon subscriber for him for sure.
There you go.
He's been the most helpful. He's been getting assimilated to Cakewalk. His were the first videos that got me up to speed because I had used Sonar back in 2008 for a little while. But when I came back to Cakewalk, it was 2018, not the same program. He's the one that got me all figured out with the interface
Nice.
because that's the most challenging thing, with getting used to Cakewalk or any DAW. That first int- the first dealing with the interface and whether you know what you're trying to do and if it works, or do you have to set something up, and you almost always have to set something up.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that he helps you kind of sort out.
He definitely has a good approach. Like you said, it's very relatable.
Yeah, and logical. The way he laid out his drum tracks, most MIDI programmers who do drums like that, they do it exactly that way. Start with the hi-hat, basically make the metronome, figure out the heartbeat that you're going to be bouncing in the song, and then lay down the bass kick, and then sprinkle it with some either accents or additional instruments at lower velocities so that they're not coming in and taking over the basic heartbeat.
Yeah, you got to keep those strong beats strong and keep the other ones kind of supporting.
Yeah, that's why all the velocities on the sprinkles need to be in the like 40 to 60 range, where the bass and the kick in those are 101 in the MIDI world. 101 to 127, that's where you want strikes and hits and accents. The rest of the stuff should be at like 50 to 60 on the levels and velocity.
And that ride pattern he had going on where he was basically
Unless it's
bouncing
that,
back and forth
like,
between that 100 to 50, like 100 to 50, 150, 150, like going back and forth to get that nice bounce.
yeah. And there are some, I really wish they weren't getting rid of those Cal scripts, but over the years, Cakewalk was a MIDI program before it was an audio program. There's Cal scripts to randomize, like you could say, like, sprinkle it between 20 to 60 velocity and randomize it this way. And you can give it human dynamics.
Yep. Give it
It's
that
useful
human feel.
stuff.
But you still can't catch up to
Well,
the
yeah, if you,
rabbit,
Nope.
especially when he's chasing a pumpkin.
Pumpkin time. But we did want to get the rest of that video out. So that was good. Thanks for starting it back up for us.
Absolutely.
you need those big ass batteries to keep up.
Yeah, right? Energizers plus 100. Or was that 150 levels?
Probably a 150.
At a 360 rotation.
He makes the shot.
Busy yet?
Yeah, that rabbit spins around.
He's a good drummer, though.
Me right round, rabbit, right round, like a rabbit, baby, rabbit, rabbit,
Oh,
round, round.
okay. That song's getting done now. That song's getting done now, and we are going to do that, and I will get a little energizer
like
bunny.
a rabbit, hop, hop, like a ribbit, rabbit, rabbit, frog thing,
Oh,
yeah. You could tell
I'll get
I'm
some
like,
frogs
totally
involved.
like, you're feeling froggy,
I'll get some
then
frogs
you
involved.
better leap, because the best thing about a frog is they eat whatever bugs them. Yup.
They do.
Chewy.
Oh my god, that's like that's the joke that a kindergartner comes home with, and like you're like, what? You're right. They do eat whatever bugs them.
They do, they do. Well, are you guys ready to say goodnight?
Yep. I think we should say goodnight. So thanks again for starting it up for us again. And thanks to Creative Sauce for the video. It was definitely good stuff.
Oh yeah, I again I picked up a few more like really power tips there.
And we will catch you all next week on Thursday.
That's right. Thank you all
Night, everyone.
for tuning in to
Say
Talking
say toodles, Ange.
IT with Glenn and Tony. Good night, everyone.
See ya.
And the loopers. Don't forget the loopers. They're your background singers at this point.